So before we dive into ACT test taking strategies, guys, I have a dating tip for you. If there's a girl you want to impress, here's what you need to do. Cook for her. Women love this, really. But here's the thing, if you want to cook for her, you want to look confident, you want to look really comfortable doing it, it's really tacky if you spend all this time reading a recipe and trying to figure out what it's talking about. So you're going to want to know your recipe ahead of time. So you'll look pretty good just carrying it through. You also don't want to take a long time making the food. What if she's starving? Not very cool. So you want to know up front what you're going to do, and you want to do it really quickly and efficiently so you look comfortable and confident. Well, ACT is exactly like that. You want to come in comfortable, confident. You want to know the directions ahead of time so you feel good about what you're about to do. And you also want to know a lot about pacing so you can tackle all the questions you need in the short period of time that you have. Let's get started. First, very quickly, know the directions ahead of time. Memorize them. You don't want to be reading them. We're going to go over all the directions for each of the sections as we hit that section. So you're going to be really familiar with the directions before you get there on test day. You don't want to be that person spending a minute, maybe 2 minutes, reading directions on test day when you could have known them beforehand. We talked about knowing the directions ahead of time. Let's talk about pacing. On the ACT, there's not a lot of time, and you've got a lot of questions that you have to answer. You're going to want to set a target score to determine your pace, to determine how fast you're going to want to go through the sections. What do I mean by that? Well, you're going to use your practice test results to figure out what's a target score that you're aiming for and how many questions you have to get right to get that score. And depending on how many you need to get right, that'll determine how fast or how slow you're going to go throughout the test. Let me show you a great table. This is in your bonus material too, if you want to take another look. Here we go. We see here that, let's say you were aiming for a composite score of about a 26. Okay, in that case, first of all, not a bad score, 90th percentile score, so better than 90% of the rest of the people taking the test. Okay, and to get that 26, you need 75% of those answers correct. This is going to affect your pacing strategy. You know you need 3/4 of the test, so there's a quarter of the test that you don't have to worry about as much. So as you go through the test, you're going to want to work pretty rapidly, pick up as many points as possible, but if you get to questions that seem really difficult or seem really, really time-consuming, not a problem. Just strategically guess on them and keep going. On the other hand, if you're someone aiming for, let's say, a 31, you know you need 90% of the questions correct. So in that case, you've got to adjust your pacing accordingly. First of all, you need to review a lot more and make sure you've got all the concepts down to get them right. And you've got to adjust your pacing so you know you're speeding up and giving yourself the right amount of time to tackle those questions and answer them correctly. Let's take a look at a section just to break this down a little bit more. Spotlight on English. Let's see how this would work with an English section. So here, target scores on English. This is kind of interesting because we'll look at how many you need to get correct. Again, for that 26, well, 90th percentile score, 60 correct answer choices. So there are 75 total, so 60 out of 75 correct. So I only can get about 15 wrong. And again, this is going to affect, first of all, where I budget my time when I'm studying, because again, we talked about how we'll know how many times a question type will appear, so you'll know where you need to target your work. And also, as you move through this section, you'll know how much time you need to spend on each particular question so that you nail the right amount of questions to get your target score. Now let's talk about how you're going to save time on test day. And let me just tell you, we're going to have some great pacing strategies on the particular section. So really, really good ones just for math, just for reading. Here's just some general stuff to know about the ACT as a whole. So do the easy ones first. On the ACT, unlike the SAT, your questions aren't in any order of difficulty. So you're going to have some easy questions at the end of a section, just like you're going to have them at the beginning, at the middle, just throughout. You want to make sure you get through each section so you can get the easy ones. So what you're going to want to do is make a couple sweeps and make sure you're going to first do the easy ones and don't get stuck in any difficult or time-consuming questions. And then if you have time, go back and try the ones that were difficult the first time around. I was one of those people who had a lot of majors in college. One of them was psych, and I learned a lot about the human brain It's a completely different part of your brain that bubbles and that solves problems. You want to get into a groove. You want to get into a problem-solving groove. So you're going to be solving problems, completely different part of your brain to shift over and fill in that bubble. So it doesn't really work to solve a problem, shift over, solve a problem, shift over. Terrible idea, and I know most students do this. Much better idea is to go through and let's say do all the answer choices on a page, so find those answers, circle them in your test booklet. And then when you're done with the actual page, transfer those onto your scantron. And the cool thing about the ACT, like we talked about, it goes from A, B, C, D to the next answer choices. For the next one will be something like F, G, H, J, then A, B, C, D, then F, G, H, J, etc. Back and forth. So it's really hard to misgrid. So this strategy will work great. You're going to first circle in your test booklet and then transfer onto your scantron. On to strategic guessing. A neat thing about the ACT, unlike the SAT, no penalty for guessing, no penalty for wrong answers. Meaning, if you don't know how to do a question, if you're not sure, you should just guess because there's not going to be a penalty for getting it wrong. So on the ACT, you want to make sure you fill in every bubble. You want to guess on every question that you don't know how to do. But you don't want to just guess blindly. You want to guess strategically. You want to see if you can cross off one or more of the answer choices. So statistically, your chances of getting the correct answer will be increased. Cool thing on the ACT, always one ridiculous answer. So usually you'll be looking through the answer choices and you'll be looking to guess, and at least one of them, sometimes two, will be totally out there. So make sure you can cross those off. And this is really neat. You can get a 26, which we talked about as a really good score, a 90th percentile score, with only half of the answer choices correct, and statistically, half of them with educated guessing. Meaning, if you were aiming for a 26 and you only got half of the answer choices correct by doing it throughout, and then you guessed on the other half, but you guessed strategically, so you were able to cross off a couple of the answer choices before you guessed, you could get a 26. Let's take a look at an example of when we might use strategic guessing. Here we've got an English question, and when we get to English, we'll talk a little bit more about this type. But you've got something underlined, and you've got to say, what sounds better? Okay, let's say we were running out of time, or we were stuck. Even without reading this, let's see if we can eliminate some answer choices that are just totally out there. Okay, we want a better phrase in this blank. Would you ever say something like, requests of plant? And if you wanted to plug it in a little bit, would you say requests of plant, a virtual green patch? No, totally out there. So we know that B just doesn't work. What about C, requests for planting? Not as terrible. But D, requests to planting? Who would say something like that? And this is very common on the ACT. So here we go. We've actually got two answer choices that we can just cross off. And statistically, our chances of getting it correct increase. Bottom line, first of all, know your directions so you don't waste time reading them. Second, pace yourself and head to the bonus materials for pacing charts so you know how many you need to get correct. Last, guess strategically, and remember, there's no guessing penalty on the ACT.
By 2. I can't do this with you two laughing back there.
Work it, work it.
So if we had, no, that's not right, 3 coplanar points.
So have you ever gotten off an airplane?
Has to be less than. Yeah. Dang.
Is it like 500 degrees in here or what?
All right, so when you're in chemistry class, you're going to be doing a lot of work. You're going to be starting over.
So as an example, we could consider like you've got a chain hanging from two fixed.